The symbolism of the fish in the context of Christianity is quite profound and multifaceted. Since the beginning of the Christian faith, the fish has been used as a significant symbol, representing not only the figure of Jesus Christ, but also conveying the idea of spirituality and the concept of faith. One of the main aspects of the symbolism of the fish is related to the Greek word ichthys, which, on top of its letters, forms an acronym, Iesus Christus, Theouios, Soter, which translated means Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. In this way, early Christians used the fish as a secret sign, especially in times of persecution, to identify each other and communicate their faith discreetly. In addition, the fish also refers to the biblical passage that tells of the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, where Jesus performs a miracle to feed a crowd, symbolizing abundance and sharing. Another relevant point is that several of Jesus' first disciples, such as Peter and Andrew, were fishermen, which further reinforces the connection between the figure of the fish and the divine call to the mission of being fishers of men. In this context, the fish therefore appears as an emblem of life, sustenance, and the mission of evangelization. It's quite common to come across this icon depicting a fish on stickers that are affixed to vehicles, as well as on prints that adorn t-shirts. Recently, news broke about the discovery of a Christian mosaic dating back to the 3rd century AD that was found in Israel. In this mosaic, there is one of the most remarkable and distinctive representations, which has caught the attention of many. It's quite simple for you to direct your gaze towards it and recognize exactly what it represents, which in this case consists of 2 fish. In addition, it is important to point out that there are a large number of other archaeological objects that have also been found, as well as a series of texts that describe the fish, emphasizing it as a symbol that has an important meaning in the Christian context. The origin of this expression or doubt is generally understood as a reflection on the provenance of something, be it an object, an idea, or information. It refers to curiosity about the roots or historical context that gave rise to what is being questioned. It is a questioning that seeks to understand the foundations, origin, or beginnings of a given subject, allowing for a deeper analysis of its characteristics and meanings. Therefore, before we address the 3 most significant reasons that elucidate why the fish came to be considered an important symbol within the context of Christianity from the very beginning, it is essential to highlight an explanation or justification that has circulated widely on the internet and which, in turn, is widely rejected by experts in history and archaeology. This critical stance on the part of academics is due to the lack of solid evidence to support such a claim. Currently, the conception of the use of the fish symbol is that it functioned as a kind of secret emblem adopted by Christians, especially in times of persecution. This representation allowed a Christian to identify himself to another individual of the same faith, thus communicating his religiosity discreetly, without having to pronounce it directly or resort to expressions that were more obvious. This strategy was intended to prevent their identities from being easily recognized by those who tried to observe and capture Christians during this period of hostility. Although this notion circulates widely in popular culture and in the collective imagination, it is important to emphasize that we have a total of 23 textual passages that explicitly address the symbolism of the fish in Christian texts dating back to ancient times. When analyzing these passages, we see that none of them makes any mention, either implicitly or explicitly, of the issue of persecution or of a persecution scenario that the early Christians might have faced. Thus, taking into account the available sources that deal with the symbolism of the fish within ancient Christianity, we find no evidence to suggest that this symbolism functioned as a secret code used in a context of persecution. This analysis proves to be quite enlightening, as it highlights the absence of correlations between the symbolism of the fish and the supposed situation of religious persecution. So what can we observe in these 23 significant passages that clearly and directly refer to the symbolism associated with the concept of the good fish? We found a text written by Tertullian of Carthage, a Christian who lived between the 2nd and 3rd centuries of the Christian era, where he expresses a very interesting metaphor. He says, "We are small fish, but since Jesus Christ is our big fish, we begin our life in the water, and only if we stay in the water will we be safe and sound." This statement seeks to illustrate the importance of the figure of Christ as protector and savior, in a context where water symbolizes life and faith. Another subject that is often associated with the fish theme is the mosaic that was found in Megiddo, an ancient city located in Israel. This mosaic, which contains representations that refer to this symbolism, can be of great interest, especially to those who are not aware of this significant discovery. In fact, this discovery, which dates back to around 2005, has gained prominence in the news recently, especially due to the exhibition of this fascinating mosaic in a renowned museum located in the United States. This mosaic represents one of the first architectural structures associated with Christianity. There are several indications that suggest that, in that specific space, the ritual of the Eucharist was carried out on a table that had been specially consecrated for this purpose. Next to this table, we can see an image of two fish, which are part of this context related to the Eucharist. This representation serves as further archaeological evidence that establishes a connection between the symbol of the fish and the Eucharistic act. In addition, there is a Christian sarcophagus dating from the 4th century AD, which was found in the city of Rome itself. This sarcophagus illustrates a scene from the Eucharist, in which the bread is represented in a very symbolic way by a wheel with 8 spokes, with a fish positioned next to this wheel. This work of art is important because it reinforces the theory that the 8-spoked wheel, in this context, is in fact a representation of the bread used in the Eucharistic celebration. To reaffirm the thesis that the wheel composed of 8 spokes is indeed identified as a type of bread, we bring up a specific example, a loaf of bread in Pompeii. This loaf was discovered during excavations in the ancient city of Pompeii and has a design in which its lines form an 8-spoked wheel. It is also worth mentioning a sarcophagus of Christian origin dating from the 4th century, which also displays baskets containing loaves of bread, which also show the same inscription in the shape of a wheel with 8 spokes. In addition to the material evidence mentioned above, there is also evidence in texts, including those of Saint Augustine of Hipona. For example, in his works, he makes a statement to the effect that the soul is nourished by the fish that was taken from the depths of the table that was prepared in the presence of the faithful, an allusion to the fact that this fish was brought from the depths in order to satiate the arid land. In this context, the fish being taken from the depths can be interpreted as a symbol of Jesus' resurrection, while the table being prepared is a clear reference to the sacrament of the Eucharist. Undoubtedly, there is an additional quote from Augustine in which he mentions that the roasted fish represents the Christ who was crucified, representing a fundamental element in religious culture. In addition, this fish is also an analogy for the bread that comes down from heaven, which has a deep spiritual meaning for the faithful. In this context, the Church is seen as an extension of participation in eternal bliss, which is supreme and imperishable happiness. In this way, it is important to note that Jesus is significantly symbolized by both the fish and the bread that is considered good and nourishing, reflecting his essence and the central role he plays in the Christian faith. I mentioned earlier that there are 3 fundamental reasons why there is an association between the fish and the figure of Jesus, didn't I? So, we've already touched on the subject of baptism, we've also discussed the Eucharist, and now it's essential that we discuss the third issue, which concerns the use of the fish as an acronym during the period of early Christianity, correct? An acronym is an abbreviated form of an expression or phrase, which is created from the initial letters of the words that make it up. These types of words are usually formed by combining the first letters of words that are part of a nomenclature or organization, resulting in a shorter, more practical term for everyday use. For example, the acronym UN stands for the United Nations Organization. Acronyms are widely used in various fields, such as science, technology, administration, and communication in general, with the aim of making it easier to refer to frequently repeated terms, simplifying language and making it more efficient. In addition, acronyms can be pronounced as single words, rather than being read letter by letter, which makes them even more functional in verbal and written communication. An acronym can be defined as a specific type of lexical creation that occurs when the letters of a word, particularly the initial letters of words that are arranged within a sentence, are used to compose a new word. This process results in the formation of a term that represents an idea or concept that may be more practical and easier to remember than the full expression. A clear example of this process is the creation of the acronym for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, better known as NATO. In this case, you can see that by taking the full expression North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it is possible to extract the initial letters of each of the words that make it up, thus resulting in the formation of the acronym that is used to make it easier to refer to this entity without having to repeat the name in full whenever necessary. In Greek, the word for fish is ikous, which is made up of the letters I, Q, which represents the K sound, theta, y and sigma. In addition, we have some ancient testimonies that corroborate this information, such as a fragment found in the Sibylline oracles. This text, which has a Christian content, is difficult to date, but it is believed to have been written before the Christianization of the Roman Empire, possibly in the 1st century. In the Sibylline oracles, we find the use of the word ikos as a way of referring to the phrase Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. If you take the initial letter of each of these terms in Greek and organize them in the sequence shown, you get the word itis, which in turn also means fish. It's fascinating to note that both the image of the fish and that of the bread, arranged in the form of an 8-spoked wheel, could equally symbolize this concept, since the representation of the 8-spoked wheel can also function as a monastic symbol. The wheel composed of 8 spokes has significant potential to be interpreted as a monogram. To clarify, a monogram is a design in which letters, usually from a name or phrase, are interlinked or superimposed in such a way as to create a single symbol, rather than separate representations with several letters. This concept is often seen in various coats of arms, such as those used by football clubs, which use this graphic feature. In the particular case of the 8-spoke wheel, which is a symbol that has been widely used in various cultural and religious traditions throughout history, it was adopted in the context of early Christianity, serving as a monogram incorporating the letters Y, K, and theta, which when combined refer to Jesus Christ, i.e. divinity. Furthermore, the very configuration of the 8-spoked wheel can be used to represent and spell out all the letters that make up the expression found in the Sibylline Oracle, which refers to Jesus Christ, Son of God, the Savior. In this process, by including the letters Y, I, theta, Y again, and, finally, sigma, it is not surprising that archaeological evidence emerges that connects these two traditions and concepts, showing the relevance of these representations in relation to the history and symbolization of Christianity. The word presented as iktos is accompanied by a representation consisting of an 8-spoked wheel, located immediately behind it. This visual element can be seen on a disc made of alabaster, which was discovered in the excavations of the ruins known as Villa Quintili Aurum, located in the city of Rome. This artifact is dated to between the 2nd and 6th centuries of the present era, and its chronology does not go beyond the latter period. In addition, there is an inscription that can be found on a wall located in the ancient city of Ephesus, which proves to be complex in terms of precisely dating it. However, this inscription also features the word iktos, as well as the representation of a wheel with 8 spokes. Returning to the discussion of Tertullian's work that we mentioned earlier when dealing with the subject of baptism, it is quite curious to note that Tertullian wrote his writings using the Latin language. However, when he refers to the word fish in this particular text, he chooses to write it in Greek. This choice seems to indicate that Tertullian was aware that the use of the term fish transcends only the symbol associated with the animal itself, because in the context of the Greek language, this word also acts as an acronym. It is important to emphasize that this acronym would not have the same effectiveness or relevance when expressed in Latin, which justifies his decision to keep the word fish in the Greek language. Therefore, this choice reveals a deep understanding on Tertullian's part of the linguistic and cultural nuances of the two languages, which reinforces the idea that he was fully aware of the importance of the Greek term in relation to its broader meaning. Thus, the statement is as follows: however, our little fish, which is compared to Jesus Christ, actually represents our big fish. Furthermore, when Jesus Christ is mentioned, he makes a point of including the word fish in its Greek form, correct? So it's quite indicative that, between the 2nd and 3rd centuries, he was already aware of the use of the Greek term as an acronym. This observation really deserves to be emphasized, doesn't it? I said earlier that the wheel with 8 spokes is a well-recognized emblem in many cultures around the world. However, it's important to emphasize that this symbol, as well as having various associations, is also suitable for use within the context of Christianity, isn't it? We often mention the subject of religions here on this channel, don't we? In a similar way to what happens with culture in general, it can be observed that culture always operates through exchange and interaction with other cultures, as well as undergoing a process of transformation that is driven by these same contacts. This dynamic is fundamental to cultural development and evolution, isn't it? In this way, it's quite common for different traditions, whether religious or not, to adopt symbols that have different origins, appropriating these icons and, consequently, giving these symbols a renewed or different meaning, isn't it? The reason I'm making this statement is that we find the representation of the fish associated with a spiritual sphere of existence among the Jews. This connection is evident especially in rabbinic texts, where the fish takes on a significant meaning within this religious context. In other words, the presence of fish is not only limited to the everyday aspect, but is also intertwined with the religious beliefs and practices of the Jews, as outlined in their literature. In the Talmud, a fundamental text of Jewish tradition, we find the concept that Jews should behave in a similar way to the fish that swim serenely in the waters of the Torah. This analogy suggests that Jewish life should be closely linked to and immersed in the lessons and teachings contained in the Torah, just as fish depend on water to survive and thrive. In addition, there is the concept of the Leviathan, which is recognized as a mythical entity that must be venerated and honored according to the precepts of rabbinic tradition. This creature, which occupies a significant place in mythology, is frequently mentioned in religious texts and is the object of study and interpretation by scholars of Jewish culture. In the aforementioned canal, one can expect the presence of an entity that will be offered as part of the eschatological banquet that marks the end of time. Furthermore, Leviathan is described as a creature belonging to the maritime world, commonly depicted in the form of a gigantic fish. Therefore, we can see that the connection between the Eucharistic banquet, which is a Christian practice, and the fish, may reflect the idea of the banquet mentioned in rabbinic tradition, where Leviathan appears, this huge primordial fish that, according to beliefs, will be offered as part of a great banquet at the end of time. What's more, when we explore the mythology and culture of ancient Greece and Rome, we notice that the fish also has a symbolic relationship with various deities from those civilizations, don't we? There is still the discussion about the sign of Pisces within the context of Hellenistic astrology, which is the form of astrology that originated in ancient Greece and continues to this day, right? The constellation of Pisces, which is one of the star formations visible in the night sky, may be related in some way to the consolidation of the fish symbol within the context of early Christianity. It is important to consider the possibility that this constellation exerted some influence on the way the fish was understood and symbolized during this historical period. Therefore, we can open a brief parenthesis to highlight this intriguing possibility of interconnection between the constellation of Pisces and the representation of the fish as a relevant symbol in early Christian culture. When we approach the astrological question related to the symbol of the fish within the context of Christianity, especially when examining the mosaic of Megiddo, we come across a representation that features not a single fish, but two fish that are organized in a way that closely resembles the way the constellation of Pisces was portrayed in the art and iconography of ancient Greece. This could therefore be considered a possible clue in this analysis, but we must emphasize that such evidence is not conclusive. In fact, it's much simpler for us to recognize these similarities and connections with narratives that are part of the New Testament. For example, where the figure of the fish appears on several occasions, isn't it? In the narrative describing the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, which is one of the best-known miracles, we also find the story of the miraculous catch, where many fish were caught in a surprising way. This passage is closely related to the metaphor that presents the apostles as fishers of men, suggesting a mission to bring people to faith. In addition, there is mention of the sign of Jonah, which is often interpreted as a reference to Jesus' resurrection, symbolizing the Savior's death and return to life. This connection goes back to the figure of the great fish, which was present in the story of Jonah. So all these ideas intertwine and complement each other within the context of Jesus' teachings and miracles, don't they? Furthermore, it's important to emphasize that the monogram, which is a representation that combines the letters of the name Jesus Christ, is used in such a way that it results in the formation of the word ictus. This word has a profound meaning, especially in the Christian context. In this way, it can be said that the meanings being mentioned are, in fact, clearly evident in the historical documentation, as well as in the archaeological discoveries that have been made. However, we cannot rule out the possibility that there are both Jewish and Greco-Roman influences in the formation and consolidation of this particular symbolism. To summarize, the symbolism related to the fish dates back to at least the 2nd century of the Christian era and is mainly linked to the themes of baptism and the Eucharist, as well as being associated with the use of the word IQs, which functions as an acronym. However, it's important to emphasize that the interpretation of these symbols and the way in which each individual has understood them throughout history is something that varies greatly. Therefore, for those of you who wish to deepen your knowledge on this specific subject, I'm going to make available in the video description, as usual, a text that covers this topic in more detail, thus providing resources for anyone interested to study a little more about this fascinating topic. Right, but that's the situation at the moment. That's all I had to say, and so the financial issue has been resolved. The commitment that I even mentioned to Israel about making this video is a dedication that I make not only to him, but also to all of you who are following along at the moment. So I want to express my gratitude, as always, for the fact that you're watching, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you very much and see you soon.